theme every day, and our theme for today is advancing a just energy transition. Today we will be focusing on how Malaysia is supporting its national energy transition initiative and playing an active role in regional, cross-border, and global energy transition efforts. We will be having a couple of panel discussions featuring prominent moderators and speakers in their respective fields. The first session that will kickstart our program at 10 a.m. is titled Asian Power Grid, the impetus and opportunities for a just energy and climate transition in the Asian regions. And following after at 12 p.m. is a Malaysia National Energy Transition Roadmap and ETR and next steps. There will also be several speakers that will deliver insightful view on few of different topics. Don't miss out presentation from Sarawak Energy Berhad on Sarawak Energy Berhad path to energy transition and 1.5-degree business ambition at 11:15 a.m. That will just wrap up the morning session. Our highlight in the evening session is the Energy Day launch and soft launch of the International Sustainable Energy Summit 2024. Don't miss out this event as our own Honorable Nik Nazmini Ahmad, Minister of Natural Resource, Environment and Climate Change, will be delivering his keynote address in this session. Following after is a few panel discussion on near zero methane emission, realistic or optimistic, and an accelerating a responsible energy transition. We will wrap up this day with few sharing session on empowering off-grid indigenous community Malaysia and a sharing session on Sabah Rural Electrification's roadmap, transforming a rural electrification with mini grids. Ladies and gentlemen, to keep yourself up to date to the latest schedule in Malaysia Pavilion, you can refer to the screen located on the left of the stage that displays the latest program of the day. For a quicker channel, please do go to Malaysia Pavilion website to get information on the go. Ladies and gentlemen, as we draw nearer to our first session, before we delve into the exciting program lineup at the Malaysian Pavilion, let's take a moment to attend some of our housekeeping matters that will ensure we all have a smooth and enjoyable session ahead. Firstly, we kindly request everyone to please silence or switch off your mobile phone as we commence the event. For those who intended to do some casual discussion, you can do it at the lobby at the front entrance of our pavilions. We would also like to invite our guests to fill up the front row seat before the session starts. Ladies and gentlemen, as you are aware, we are sharing the same building with the other country pavilions. There might be some auditory disturbance, so please do bear with us. Additionally, we have a registration link available at the entrance for those who haven't yet registered. We encourage you to do so. Registering allows us to keep you updated on our upcoming events and activities. Dear guests, thank you so much for your patience. As we draw closer, I would like to invite all of the guests to be seated as we will start our session in just a few minutes. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite all of our guests to be seated and fill up the front row before we start our session at 10 a.m. Thank you. Assalamualaikum and selamat datang. Welcome to the Malaysia Pavilions at COP28 Dubai. I hope our guests had already have a great breakfast because we will begin our first sessions. The session of the day, the first session of today is a panel discussion on Asian power grid, the impetus and opportunity for a just energy and climate transition in the Asian region. Ladies and gentlemen, this session will be focusing on the ongoing effort by utilities in the Asian region to enhance regional power integrations and in realizing the Asian Power Grid Initiative. This session will be moderated by Ms. Nadila Shani, Senior Officer of Power, Fossil Fuel, Alternative Energy and Storage Department from Asian Center for Energy ACE. And joining with her today is Yang Berbahagia, Dato' Engineer Technologies 𝗕𝗹𝗶𝗪𝗏, Chief Executive Officer from Energy Commissions, Mr. 𝗕𝗹𝗶𝗵𝗆, Chief Executive Officer from Ilya Grid International, Mr. 𝗣𝗃𝗄𝗃, Director Transmission and System Planning, PT-PL, Persero, and Mr. Dave Anandan, Chief Grid Officer from Tenaga Nasional Berhad, TNB. Let us give a warm welcome to our panelists to the stage to start the session.
Please take a seat, all the panelists. Thank you for the MC for the very kind introduction. I'm actually very honored here and given the opportunities from TNB and Malaysia and REC as well to be at the heart where all the energy transition talk happens in the regions. And our today's discussions is titled ASEAN Power Grid, the impetus and opportunities for just energy and climate transition in ASEAN region. So before we start, I would like to give context of what we are discussing today. So ASEAN is the 5th largest economy in the world. So we have a combined GDP of $3.3 trillion US, and ensuring the reliability and affordability of electricity is then vital to support this growth. And not only that, we are facing now with the challenge of providing the electricity and energy, not only in reliable and affordable manner, but also sustainably. So this is the challenge that we want to discuss more and more today. And actually, in the area of the power interconnectivity, ASEAN has paved years of bilateral cooperations for power interconnectivity under the ASEAN Power Grid. So today we see 7.7 gigawatt of interconnections we have under the APG, and under the ASEAN Interconnection Master Plan study, or AIMS, which is served as a technical reference for us in driving and implementing the ASEAN Power Grid. We have identified that there are 18 interconnections in the regions that we should pursue. And the study also find that the identified interconnections are all technically viable and also economically viable. And among this list of interconnections, we also have the Sumatra, Indonesia, and Peninsular Malaysia interconnections, and also Kalimantan to Sabah interconnections that we are currently exploring. And last week, just before I came here, we are convening with all ASEAN stakeholders, all the policymakers, the regulators, and the utilities in all ASEAN member states to discuss the renewal process of the APG MOU renewal. So under the APG MOU, this is a legal framework that all the ASEAN countries are collaborating in order to enhance the regional interconnectivity in ASEAN. And thus, in today's discussion, we'll explore and delve deeper on the APG topic from the country lenses. So we have here perspective from Malaysia and Indonesia, and also learn from the international experience from Europe. So that without further ado, I would like to introduce our esteemed panelists for today. First is Mr. Dave Anandan, Chief Grid Officer of Tenaga Nasional Berhad. Mr. Dev has served more than 34 years with TNB, holding various positions in the company that spans the transmission business. Mr. Dev, as the Chief Grid Officer, is responsible for overall performance of TNB's transmission business, as well as focusing on delivering new projects and a major role in realizing the ASEAN power grid and driving the energy transition agenda in TNB. Please give a big round of applause for Mr. Dev. And join with us today as well, 𝗵𝗫𝗪𝗏𝗪𝗏𝗪𝗏𝗪𝗏𝗪𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 questions. Dato' brings over 20 years of experience in the power sector. He began his career with Tenaga Nasional Berhad Engineers and has worked for Malaysian and Australian national power utilities. So he also was appointed as a Chief Executive Officer of Malaysia Nuclear Power Corporation by the Prime Minister Department in 2017 to 2018. And Dato' is also the Chief Operating Officer at the Energy Commission and later assumed the role of Acting Chief Executive Officer in April 2019. So utilizing his wealth of experience and knowledge to drive the progress and innovation in the energy sector. So please give him a round of applause. We are glad to have you here, Dato'. Thank you for joining us. And then we also have Mr. 𝗕𝗵𝗽𝗪𝗧𝗧, Director of Transmissions and System Planning at PLN Persero. Currently, besides being the Director of Transmission and System Planning, Mr. 𝗕𝗵𝗽 also appointed as the President Commissioner of PLN Nusantara Power and Chairman of the Indonesia Electrical Power Society or MKI. Mr. 𝗕𝗵𝗽𝗪𝗧𝗧 started his career at PLN since 1994. And hold various important positions during his work in PLN, including the General Manager of Electricity Research and Development Center, General Manager of the Main Unit of Load Control Center, and the Head of Center of Excellence Unit. So big applause for Mr. 𝗕𝗵𝗽𝗪𝗧𝗧. And last but not least, we have Mr. 𝗕𝗫𝗫𝗀𝗏𝗏, Chief Executive Officer of 𝗕𝗫𝗫𝗏𝗏 International, more than 25 years experience in the power transmission and distribution sector. Mr. 𝗕𝗫𝗫𝗏 has a range of experience in power system engineering, asset management, strategic advisory, as well as the development of state-of-the-art transmission asset, including long-distance HVDC and offshore grids. So big applause again for Mr. 𝗕𝗫𝗫𝗏𝗏. Thank you for the very esteemed panelists today. We hope that we could have interactive discussions with all of you and we could have candid conversations as well with all the panelists. So without further ado, I would like to turn the first questions for Mr. Dev. So recently, we know that Malaysia has launched the National Energy Transition Roadmap, which lay out the government target for the Malaysia, how to do a greener and a low-carbon economy. And among the target, the government already implied that they want to increase the renewable energy target. So as a power sector, decarbonization is really important, and TNB will play a very important role in this. Could you share perhaps from TNB perspective what will the future national power development will look like?
Okay, thank you, Shani, and good morning all. When the SP 2050, our TNB launched our SP 2050, we have got a trajectory to reduce our coal total net zero by 2050. So in our energy transition plan, we have focused our strategies into three key focus areas across the value chain. One is to accelerate our our generation decarbonization. That's where we look at all our efforts in hybrid floating solars, all the clean technologies. On the demand and consumer sense, we have got cross-sector electrification as well as prosumers. That means empowering the consumers. So we have got e-mobility, EV vehicles, mass electrification of transportation sector, through the ECRL, data centers. So those two were part of the earlier value chain. Then when it comes to grid, so our focus on grid is for flexible grid and cross-border interconnections. So on the first part, we have to facilitate the grid to enable faster and more volumetric renewable energy penetration, taking the cue from the NETR launch. When NETR was launched, they introduced the solar parks, RE zones. So what we did for the grid is we have identified what we term as nodal points, or so-called injection points, where developers can come in and connect RE facilities without having to sort of reinforce the grid. That means these nodal points are readily available for developers to come in and connect. So as of now, we have identified, for on the grid, we have got 12 nodal points at 500 megawatts capacity each, which is about 6 gigawatt in total, as well as we have got on the distribution side, we have got another 6 gigawatts of nodal points available for developers to come in and connect. This will be the fastest mode of connecting without having to reinforce the grid. While this is progressing, we will also look at identifying, we have already identified, based on solar radiance, the portions of the network that need to be upgraded. So we have got a two-pronged or two-phased approach, whereby developers can come in now, connect to these nodal points identified immediately, and while that is going on, we will then, in phases, with the blessings of the Commission, when you have put in the proposal, upgrade the existing networks by uprating the conductors or identifying new corridors where these mass and renewable sources can be connected. This is the first pronged approach to facilitating the RE penetration into our network. Together with that proposal, we have identified, because based on the study that we have done, the minute we cross 6 gigawatts of renewable energy, we need to couple that together with storage facilities, battery storage, pump storage, because to maintain the integrity and security of the grid. So together with our proposal, we have identified what we call as nodal points. We have identified what is called as interconnection facilities, where we will facilitate potential also storage or small capacity of the storage to help facilitate the network stability. All this has been put in the hope of, we can accelerate the ramp up of renewable energy penetration into the grid. That's on the fortifying or preparing the grid for influx or rapid acceleration of renewable energy. For security purposes, we have also started, Malaysia is unique in the sense that we have already interconnected with our neighbors in Singapore, and we are also interconnected with our neighbors in IGAT. We have just completed our feasibility study with our counterparts in IGAT, and we have also put in a proposal now with the blessings, hopefully with the blessings of the regulators, that we can upgrade the existing capacity with our neighbors to the North IGAT from the current 300 megawatts to 1.5 gigawatts. So this will be a 5 times increase in the interconnection capacity, and this will allow more renewable energy integration from our existing 2 neighboring countries. We are also looking at we are underway with the feasibility study of putting in the second link with Singapore to help facilitate this flow of green energy. So I think hopefully that gives a bit of context for...
Thank you, Mr. Dev, for the overview. If I could summarize in very short, the TNB has 2 strategies for implementing the net zero target from the government. First is to look at the demand and the supply, and especially for the supply, it has a plan to do like the nodal point for the RE interconnections, and also identifying where the grid that should be upgraded in the national level. And on top of that, also identifying the interconnection with other countries to support this overall agenda. So thanks for that. I will pick up again later, but let me turn to Dr. Razib from the Energy Commissions. So I would like to get the perspective from the regulators, basically. Under the NETR, we know that the better regional interconnectivity could potentially help the higher renewable energy utilizations for the region and the country in Malaysia specifically. So from the government perspective, what the country level effort that we need to do to unlock these opportunities in increasing the bilateral interconnections. Learning from the LTMS, I'm sure that you are involved in LTMS. Perhaps could you share something about that?
Thank you, Shani. Thank you for inviting 𝗓𝗏𝗃 Tenaga Energy Commission to this panel session. The short answer is yes. We do need interconnection. This is one of our tools. We have many options to accelerate our net zero journey to 2050 or net zero. So without interconnection, it's very difficult, very challenging to meet the net zero. Yeah, we learn a lot from this evolution, I call it, from bilateral to multilateral mechanism when we started Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, and extended to Singapore. Bilaterally, we started with simple mutual emergency support, mutual technical support, and system security support. We also only, it's called barter trade with Singapore. When you need energy, you borrow, and then you pay back in terms of energy per se. Then we evolved into a little bit commercial with Thailand, that we have a pricing mechanism that, when we need energy, we can actually buy from Thailand at a certain time, at a certain price. So that is a bilateral. There are benefits of this energy interconnection, simple as sharing a spinning reserve. And you have different time zone picking. If you look at Malaysia and the southern Thailand, different peak time, then we can have what we call a peak shaving mechanism that we can import, while southern Thailand is at a trough load, and we can export when Thailand is a peak at sometime at midnight. Yeah. So those are these traditional kind of bilateral benefit, sharing spinning reserve and so on. But when we move into LTMS, we realize there are a lot of benefits. Then I can say this a breakthrough, a milestone, a few things. Number one, we turn this ASEAN power grid vision into reality. There's always our aim to realize all these 10 ASEAN member countries, can buy and sell and trade power among ourselves. A few things that we achieved the milestone. Number one is, we signed this agreement amongst 4 parties, multilaterally, and we signed energy agreements, wheeling agreements, and balancing service and so on and so forth. Looks like market. All these typical products of the market. You have multi-parties, you have multi-trade between countries. Yeah. And we also resolve all these operators. It's important for them to operate. There are 4 operators: Laos operators, Thailand, Malaysia, and Singapore. So they talk with each other. They actually operate this mechanism. So we have kind of a manual code for them to smoothly operate this mechanism. And not to forget the legal issue, the taxes. We actually decided to zeroize for the time being. We don't charge a cross-border tax to facilitate this mechanism. And on legal aspect, and we will respect each individual jurisdiction. You know, we call it meet you at the border. We handshake and then we hand over electron at the border. So we don't have to interfere. We don't have to bother about, you know, we don't have to go into the other jurisdiction. So we respect each other law and legal and so on. Yeah. And and what we see, this benefit, we under AMIM meeting that we have agreed to replicate this into Borneo grid, so BEIMP, Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Philippines, to replicate this multilateralism in their grid. And I'm sure that you heard about Greater Mekong River mechanism and so on. So that will be, you know, the beginning of this ASEAN power grid, single market and multilateralism and so on. And I think to add to the point, Shani, that why we need this. I mean, that's obvious. You look at various studies about ASEAN. You have energy outlook that justify the need to have, you know, optimize between one source countries to one demand countries. And we have a common goal, ASEAN, net zero 2050. I don't think individual ASEAN country, of course, maybe some can have net zero achievement journey, but there are excess energy. So those excess countries can export, can will power over other countries and to reach that importing countries. And there are countries like Singapore that require, you know, renewable energy, massive, 4 gigawatt. And there are countries can be a hub in between, and to allow this process to go through and so on. So I think there's a lot of justification why we need ASEAN Power Grid. And we have the template, and what we need to do is accelerate this program and, you know, make this dream become reality. Yeah.
Thank you, Dato. I think you mentioned a very important point and how the driver changes. Before it's bilateral, and now we are trying to move to the multilateral where involve more parties and more countries to expand the region. And you also mentioned that in that talks, there are a number of things that we need to think of about the agreement, the legal, and also the standards and the code that is required to make it possible. And I really like your, you mentioned that it's a clear why, but how, it's something that we need to work together. So I'd like to come back again to that point and dig deeper on that, but let me turn to Mr. Effie from PLN. So I think it's similar to the Malaysia's journey. Indonesia is also paving the journey towards the energy transitions, and the government also has a net zero emission target and agenda as well. So, and a big part of it is also alignment with the PLN plan moving forward. So perhaps could you share the PLN upcoming new electricity business plan that I believe will have a higher share of renewable and includes the potential of having Nusantara super grid. I think, can you share more on that, Pak Effie?
Thank you, Shani. Good morning, everybody. Maybe we can start with the energy transition era. In energy transition era, in our case, now we not design based on affordability and also security. We now in Indonesia try to trade off trilemma of energy. Environment, sustainability, energy security, and also affordability. In 2021, we have launched net zero emission to 2060, and based on that plan, we have changed our previous electricity development plan 2019-2028, and canceling around 13.3 gigawatt coal. And also we state that start from 2021, we not build the new coal. At that time, we has launched we call it 𝗖𝗶𝗃𝗃, is 10 years development plan. And we built around 21 gigawatt renewables by 2030. And based on this plan, our country also enhanced the NDC from reducing 29% by 2030 to become 31.89. Based on this new target, we now discussing and also plan together with the Ministry of Energy how to improve more than the previous and the existing 𝗖𝗶𝗃𝗃. In this 𝗖𝗶𝗃𝗃, the existing 𝗖𝗶𝗃𝗃, the fuel mix of coal reduced from 67% to 59% in 2030. And this in a new design, it's a draft now, it reducing become 55%. Even we also plan till 2040. In this 2040, the fuel mix for coal is just only 34%. And also the renewables in 2030 increase from 21 gigawatt, it's become 28 gigawatt. Even in 2040, we will build till 60 gigawatt. 32 gigawatt is firm energy from hydro and geothermal, and the rest 28 gigawatt is come from VRA. That's the new plan for our new 𝗖𝗶𝗃𝗃s that has been draft and discussing with the Ministry of Energy. This, we call it this accelerated renewable development plan. And we also include here is building the national grid. Mostly is some kind of green enabler transmission grid. As you know that also there is some mismatch between resources and demand. Resources, especially hydro and geothermal, is far from the demand. And also in our case, we have a lot of island. We have around 17,000 island. In 4 big island, it's also there is some difference between island. The demand mostly in Java and Sumatra, and some resources is also exist in Sumatra and Kalimantan, for instance, and also Sulawesi. And based on this condition, we plan in this accelerated renewable development plan for building interconnection between islands. We will connecting between Sumatra and Batam and Bintan. It's around 1,500 kilometers to supporting Batam and Bintan with the renewable energy. And it's also possible to connect to Singapore for supporting this ASEAN power grid. And another is connecting between Sumatra to Java, because in Java all of the renewables will be exhausted in around 2040. We must export the power from Sumatra to Java at that time. In Sumatra we have firm energy renewables around 15 gigawatt, 8 gigawatt hydro and 7 gigawatt is geothermal. We also can connect from Sumatra to Peninsula to supporting the Asian power grid for with these resources. We also plan to transferring power from Kalimantan to Java into 2000 around 2040 maybe. And at that time when all the resources in Java, Bali has been exhausted, not just only from Sumatra, it's also from Kalimantan, because we had a lot of hydropower there in Sumatra. And maybe we can also transferring the power to Sabah, because now there is also some discussion regarding this. And we also can connect from Sumba, because in the east of Indonesia, like Nusa Tenggara Timur, Nusa Tenggara Barat, a lot of resources related with the solar. And also in the south of Indonesia, the wind potential power is also big. We also can harnessing these resources to supporting all of the demand in Indonesia and also the ASEAN power grid. Maybe this that I want to share to all of you how Indonesia can support the ASEAN orbit.
Thank you, Mr. Effie. I think you are highlighting a very important point as well. Like in the conversations of ASEAN Power Grid, we need to look at the country perspective as well. And I think you just mentioned how the challenge for PLN as a Indonesia is an archipelagic country. There is a certain challenge as well that is pertinent to connect all of these regions, and also how to implement the energy transitions. You mentioned about the coal phase out, and then massive RE that will be penetrating in the grid. I think this is a huge transformations plan that PLN will do. So this is something that we could also need to bring under the ASEAN Power Grid conversations, whether there's an opportunity, but there are also country perspective and priorities as well. So I think we hear Malaysia and Indonesia perspective. So let's now hear from the international perspective, Mr. Didier. Elia is one of the Europe top 5 transmission system operator and key player in the European energy market as well. So could you share some experience or project that can relate to the ASEAN that we could learn in developing the APG right now? Because you know perhaps now how it look like in our regions, and perhaps you could share some important lesson learned from the Europe.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to be here, especially Malaysia. You know, we have good ties with Malaysia for years and years, and it's always a pleasure to be here. And also congratulations for the organization, because it's really, really top. So yeah, we are indeed operating in Europe. So, you know, Elia Group is operating 2 systems, one in Belgium and one in Germany. So we are really in the center of the electrical system of Europe. And we've been talking about interconnectivity, interconnectors for 30 years almost. We started, you know, with interconnectors because we wanted security of supply. So we first wanted to make sure that if something bad happens, you can rely on your neighbors to save you. That was already a difficult discussion at the time. But once the connection were there, we understood that we could use them also to share power. So we started to trade electricity and reduce the price, actually. So interconnectors became a real tool to have a market. And we were really pushing hard to develop that market. We are really in the center of Europe, and we saw a lot of value to create that market. And now, today, the story is even different. We recognize today that without the interconnectors, we cannot operate the grid with high penetration of renewable. So the only way for us to push forward renewable is to further connect. So as we hear a lot here at COP28, there's no transition without transmission. We need grids. Everybody's talking about that, and we fully support that idea. To push further and to decarbonize, we need to electrify. And to electrify, we need to connect renewable, of course, and then develop interconnectivity. So for us, grids is really the solution. So we've been in Europe developing grids for 30 years. And if you look at the roadmaps now that we have, it's even more than what we ever developed. So we have plans to develop, I think, 160 more interconnectors in Europe to make the market even more liquid and to support integration of renewable. So one of the lessons learned first is like connectivity is not only for renewable, it provides security of supply, it creates a market, and then you can push more renewable. So triple advantage of grid. That's first advantage that we see even before starting. Another thing we saw is electrification is happening faster even than we thought it would. So we see industry shifting to electrons. We see electrical cars coming to the market. We see people installing rooftops, heat pumps, and so it goes very quickly. In our control zone at Elia, we anticipate an increase of the loads only by electrification. It's 50% in the 6 years to come. So it's massive. And so the second message is don't wait to develop the grids, because the worst that could happen is like the grid comes too late to support decarbonization. So for us, more and more investing in grids is what we call a least regret scenario, or even a no regret scenario. Every investment will be profitable. So, and we know it takes time to develop a line, an interconnector, a subsea cable, so the sooner the better. So we are really pushing hard to front load, let's say, the investment into the grid, just to make sure we are in time. And that's, I think, another very important lessons to be learned. Maybe another one is it's very expensive to develop those interconnectors. So it's very CapEx intensive. So it's very, very important to look at optimizing the technical solution. What technology to use, which voltage level, for instance, is it onshore, offshore? But you see in Europe, for instance, we started to develop what we call point-to-point connections. So you go from country A to country B. And now actually we are shifting to what we call hybrid connection. So we go indeed from country A to country B. But midway, for instance, we're tapping onto renewable generation. So now you see projects, we cross the sea, and in the middle of that sea, you just plug renewable energy. So then you create a link which not only can share power between two countries, but can also get power on the route to the other country. And so you optimize the business case, and you make it even more attractive for not only the regulated companies like the one we are, but also to private investors willing to invest in those assets. And that's another thing, so optimizing the design. Another thing is we are developing very complex systems, extremely complex. And our lessons is like you cannot operate a grid today like you did 10 years ago or 5 years ago or even last year. So it's very important not only to invest in assets, but also invest in knowledge, in people, in research, to make sure you can operate those things. It's extremely complex. It's power electronics. You know, you have power electronics in the storage, you have power electronics in the HVDC connections, in the rooftops. It's power electronics everywhere. And it's very difficult to manage, you say. So developing the system before they are put in service, it's also very, very, very critical. And maybe a last point, which for us is also critical, none of that can work without a regulation. So having the right regulation in place to make sure investment can happen, to make sure the system works, to make sure you can attract private investors, and to make sure you don't face any blackouts, because that's the worst that could happen. So blackout every day would not be a nice story to tell. So it's very important to put the right regulation in place. What I can share with you is we are very impressed by what Malaysia is planning. So the vision of Malaysia, I had the pleasure to attend a few conferences in Kuala Lumpur, and we are very impressed by the vision. And I think you have the willingness to achieve something great. And also you are very smart, and you can also learn quickly from what we did and the mistakes we did as well. So we are really, really willing to help you and certainly make sure you avoid the pitfalls or the mistakes we did. So you can leapfrog really into the future of interconnectivity. And I think you should look at what we did and try to avoid the mistakes we did as well. That would be another lessons learned for you, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Didier. You mentioned very important lesson learned that we need to keep in mind. So the security of supply and how it will drive market, and also after that we'll have more renewables to come in. The new trend of electrification is really opportunities to start investing in the grid. And I quote you, it's better early than late. It's sooner the better. And it's important to in investing in the infrastructure, but also beyond the infrastructure. So knowledge, assets, and then the technology, because it's getting more and more complex. So the investment need is not only the capital of the infrastructure, but all the things around the operations of the complex grid itself. So yeah, I think we have a good sense now of how the lesson learned from Europe and what can we leapfrog and do in these regions. So I'll turn back to Mr. Dev. So we already hear several times that it is a timely that we push forward the ASEAN Power Grid, and we need to, it's the visions of turning the dreams into reality. It's clear why, and now it's the how. So I'd like to get your perspective on, in the utility level, what are the things that we need to collaborate in implementing the APG between the utilities, and how we should achieve that in the regions.
So actually this ASEAN Power Grid was something, it's not something relatively new in this context. I think the discussion started way back since 1990, and I think a multi-level of studies have been done, and I think we are now at AIMS 3. That means the blueprint on how all the ASEAN countries should be interconnected is already available. That means what are the interconnections that's required, the capacity and the technical type of connections are also sort of readily available. Now the impetus is because all the ASEAN interconnected countries have got almost the same timeline or same declaration to meet the net zero. So therefore the sense of urgency is we need to, because no country can do this alone. So besides the danger of curtailment of things like that, we also need the interconnections for fuel diversity and the security of supply, right? So it is becoming a greater urgency for all parties involved in ASEAN to facilitate these interconnections. So thus far, all the interconnections have been a bilateral arrangement between utility to utility. We started off with Singapore, for instance. We started off with IGAT, and now we have got the multilateral LTMS. We have also signed off many MOUs with our neighboring regions. We have got 7 MOUs ongoing, Sumatra, Sarawak. We have got many MOUs and feasibility studies. To then realize whatever the blueprint is, how to deliver that in the fastest, shortest period. But all of this is championed or managed under the auspices or umbrella of HAPUA, Head of ASEAN Power Utilities, and this is then brought into the ministerial level for deliberation. At the last National Energy Transition Roadmap launch, the Malaysian government introduced a National Energy Council to be chaired by the Prime Minister himself to ensure that all the initiatives, all the milestones of the NETR is being met and tracked. It's tracked and met. Likewise, in Europe, all these interconnections, the power development plan of every utility is submitted to the regulator, and the regulator consolidates, collates all these power development plans and comes out with what they call a PCI, Project of Common Interest, that facilitates the interconnections between all the member countries. Now, when a project gets tagged as, maybe Didier can elaborate a bit better later, but when a project gets tagged as a project of common interest, that gives it the kind of better funding, leverage, and opportunities for the priority for these interconnections to be implemented. So, likewise, at the ASEAN level, what would be best if there is a steering committee at the highest level to oversee all of these power development plans and to then tag these are the critical projects that need to be done for the greater good of ASEAN and to achieve the net zero in totality. So I think that's something that I think a little bit more emphasis could do. Besides the national level drive, it could be at the ASEAN level then to facilitate the ranking or, the urgency in getting whatever projects that have already been listed to be championed and to be driven when it gets that kind of mandate or that kind of focus.
Thank you, Mr. Dev. I totally second your perspective on we have a lot of study has been done, we have a lot of groundwork that is established. But it's for us now to how to track the progress of all and how to convene all the works and really put it into implementations. And you mentioned that there is a platform or an idea of project of common interest that we should consider in the ASEAN regions to move this forward even faster. So I'd like to turn to Dato then from the perspective of the regulators. We have different platforms in ASEAN right now. We have HAPUA, Head of Power Utilities Authorities, and also we have the ASEAN Energy Regulators Networks, and also from the policymaker we have the APG Consultative Committee. So from the current setup, do you think that we need to do something to enhance this kind of setup to really move forward the implementations of the APG?
Yeah, again, the short answer is a big yes. Before I answer those yes, but let me go back to this power development plan. You look across 10 ASEAN countries, I mean, Indonesia, Malaysia, we have recognized there is another elements of import, of even export, if you have excess of energy. You know, there's, again, I go back to why. It's not difficult to justify why, to answer why. And efficient, super efficient. You need a super efficient energy industry to have, you know, super efficient economic. And we have a common goal. Almost, I can say almost 10 ASEAN countries have pledged 2050 net zero. That's the journey that, you know, we have the milestone and so on and so forth. But again, I would like to propose two things. We would like to propose two things. To answer your question on, you know, we have a bit of initiative in separate subsector network and regulatory club and so on. You mentioned ARN. I would like to propose we have to consolidate those units or those working group and HAPUA and ARN and Council APG into one permanent secretariat to be parked under ASEAN Secretariat and to be funded by ASEAN Secretariat to really focus on how can we actually devise you mentioned about regulatory frameworks and market frameworks, mechanism and so on, that to be focused on that new entity under ASEAN Secretariat. That's number one. Number two, we really have to consider seriously setting up ASEAN operators. Just like in Europe, you have NTSO. So these ASEAN operators has mechanism to discuss the technicalities, you know, harmonizing the standard between various countries, you know, and so on and so forth. How to operate, how to handshake, how to make sure we have, you know, understanding code and so on between multi-complex, you know, different system, different stage and different technology advancement and so on. We do need one single operator to manage those technicalities. Yeah. So those two immediate idea that we have to discuss at, you know, SOME's senior ASEAN ministerial and also at AMIM, escalate to AMIM, ASEAN Minister of Energy meeting. Yeah, yeah. So there are other important principles that we have to consider. Number one, we have to allow this multi-directional. You know, LTMS is only one way from Laos to Singapore, so we have to be a bit more flexible to allow multi-directional, even reverse directional, even from Singapore, go back to Laos, or even from Malaysia to Singapore. So that's one aspect. So number two, we have to address the carbon credit transfer. So that's very important that if the importing country buying the renewable energy, so they have the right to actually to claim a green certificate from the exporting countries. Yeah. And the other thing is we would encourage to consider system to system, just like Europe, you know. You not only have dedicated transmission line, you only benefit from, you know, integrating system, you know, one country to the country that you actually enhance system security, benefit of flexibility in terms of operating, you know, system to system power network. Yeah. And the most important thing that we would like to propose to consider in basic principle is, you know, any ASEAN countries can keep their so-called raw material at their home countries. What they need to do is they just convert that into electron. For example, Laos. they keep their hydro, but that they do, they just convert into electron, then wheel power over to Singapore and so on. And even in Indonesia, you can keep your resources in your country. You just convert to electron and you trade among ASEAN countries. That, whatever raw material you have, stay in your country. You just convert that into electron and trade among ASEAN countries. So I agree with you. We can leapfrog from, lesson learned from European. Took them 30 years, but we can't wait 30 years. With 2050 is even less than 30 years. So we have to start fast. We have to have maybe Formula One speed. I don't know. I agree with Dave urgency. There is new impetus. We used to call this interconnection as enabler for variable RE, but now it's a must because there's one country. I don't think we have enough renewable energy for one country to have self-sufficient renewable energy to meet their net zero target. And there are countries who have excess energy that can export. Of course, with market value, importing country can pay any market value because they need to decarbonize their industry, their country, and so on and so forth. Yeah, we have to be practical. We have to speed up, Formula One speed. We have to discuss on the table all this, elephant in the room, regulatory framework, commercial agreement, template, and so on, taxes, cross-boundary jurisdiction, and so on. We can look at LTMS success story or the pathfinder that we did in LTMS. A lot of things to do, but nothing insurmountable. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Dato. So you mentioned very important points as well that we also discuss in the ASEAN level to have like a dedicated APG secretariat to spur the implementations even faster. And also you mentioned about the importance of set up the ASEAN operators to harmonize and manage how these different things to work smoothly in the operational level. And to turn the multi-directional, the bilateral to multi-directional power trade that we have so much learning from LTMS. Now it's time to put the framework on to expand it further. And also to have if we are exporting renewables, then we have sort of REC platform or framework that we need to also work on together in the ASEAN regions. So we have talked a lot about the ASEAN power grid, but we haven't touched about the financing. So I'd like to turn to Mr. Effie. A big part of moving these implementations of transmission and infrastructure is we require a lot of finance. And recently, I think we want to hear more on the CIPP or Comprehensive Investment and Policy Plan under the 𝗏𝗃𝗃, which is would be a platform or financing window for Indonesia to do the energy transitions. Perhaps could you share more on the progress and how it actually materialized to support the PLN to do further for the energy transitions, especially for the transmission?
Thank you. Maybe we start with what is 𝗏𝗃𝗃. 𝗏𝗃𝗃 is a Just Energy Transition Partnership. This is start last year in G20 summit. Indonesian government and IPG. IPG is an international partnership group. It's a group of countries that like to support the energy transition. We, Indonesian and this IPG, have a joint statement at that time that we want to support and accelerating the energy transition. Indonesia has signed the Paris Pledge that in this pledge we must reducing our emission unconditionally and conditionally. Unconditionally, we enhance from 29% reducing by 2030 to 31.89. In conditionally, there is a 41 rising to 43. It's 31, 34, 34, 31 is rising to 34. And what does this mean, the unconditionally and conditionally? Unconditionally is mean that we pledge by our self that we will achieve whatever it is. But conditionally is need some supporting from another institution. That's why the 𝗣𝗃𝗃 is come from this condition, this conditionally aspects. And with this agreement at that time, with the joint statement, we start together the 𝗣𝗃𝗃 Secretariat. This 𝗣𝗃𝗃 Secretariat have a 4 working group: technical working group, financial working group, policy working group, and just energy transition working group. We work together with them, and as I said before, that we must plan based on how we trade off the 3 lemma of energy: environment sustainability, energy security, and affordability. Based on this, we have explained to you to accelerated renewable energy development, that we start to achieve our target based on unconditionally condition. Yeah, it means that we try to support this financing by ourselves to collecting from the market or something. In this working group, we work together and agree that there is, we call it the ultra accelerated energy, renewable energy development, that start to achieving this. And with this, 𝗣𝗃𝗃 promised that they were supporting around $20 billion. And now we have launched in 21st of November this month, last month, that there is a CIPP, Comprehensive Investment Policy and Plan. What this mean? It means that there is a list of investment, IFA is investment focus area. There is 5 investment focus area. Investment focus area 1 is regarding the grid. The total project is around 37. And the kilometer circuit is around 7,000 kilometer circuit, with the budget around $30.3 billion. And there is also an investment focus area in hydropower development and others. There is 5. And based on this, we try now together. Yesterday we discussing how we try to implement of this project. We work together and then start to make project development together, which is the priority. And maybe it's the same like a VCI. It could be there is some project common interest between Indonesian government and IPG, and also the 𝗣𝗃𝗃, because there is a 𝗣𝗃𝗃. 𝗣𝗃𝗃 is a global financing alliance for net zero. It's a club of bank that start to supporting this. And that's maybe the latest update about the 𝗣𝗃𝗃. And now we start to implementing this together. Maybe that's for short information.
Thank you, Pak Effie. I think it's very sounds promising. Hopefully, it falls into the plan. And I think I'd like to turn the last questions to short remarks, because we have limited time as well. So, hearing from the discussions from today and learning from the different market that we have in ASEAN, the structures, could you recommend what kind of power markets that really fits into the ASEAN regions based on your perspective from Europe?
Yeah, that's a tough question for a short amount of time, but I think you have all the foundations in place with APG, with Papua and everything, so you have already a lot of thinking in place. I agree with you that with a little tweak left and right, with looking at how we did that maybe in Europe with PCI, you could speed up and go to the Formula One speed very quickly. I think you already have the foundation in place, so that's great. What I wanted to mention is Malaysia has a lot of natural resources to go for net zero. You have a lot of sun, for instance, but that will probably not be enough to go to net zero. So you will depend on the north, the south to get hydro and other resources. So the way forward is really region. You need to talk to the neighbors, you need to develop a regional market. What you did with LTMS is a good step forward, and I think the next step is to go further with the same model. The future is really connecting to neighbors, having PCI to agree on what is of common interest and agree on how to finance these things. So I think for me the recommendation is really develop that regional market as quickly as you can, because that will really be opening the market. The other thing is the market has to be fluid. So you need to make sure that the market connects the supply and the demand, that you have the flexibility to negotiate lots of contracts quickly and have flexibility. And if you manage to be regional and flexible enough, because renewable needs a lot of flexibility, then definitely you will be ready to face the future pretty soon, yeah.
Thank you. I think it sends the very important message that we actually have all the foundations in place. It's how we turn it and gearing up faster and faster to implement this. So for the conclusions, allow me to summarize of the things that we just discussed. I apologize that we cannot have Q&A with the audience. But we see that real opportunities here for the ASEAN Power Grid. We have a higher political buy-in from everyone. It's a clear why. And now it's the how. And to do the how, we have to keep in mind that we have actually challenge to overcome. First is the technical, the harmonizations and the standards that we have to have, the financial and bankability of turning these planning projects into reality, and the regulatory and institutional setup that we have to perhaps consider an 𝗕𝗵𝗫𝗀𝗃𝗃 Secretariat to move forward, consider the project of common interest as a framework to further work together as a regions to implement this. And I think we have a very fruitful discussions today. Thank you for sharing your perspective and thoughts. So let's give everyone big a round of applause for today's discussion. So with that, I would like to also